So, hey everyone, this is James Colburn with John L. Scott Real Estate. John L. Scott is a Pacific Northwest real estate company with 3,300 brokers and over 110 offices. We're located in California, Washington, Oregon, and Idaho. And this show is all about hearing from and learning from outstanding business leaders, both in and outside of the real estate industry, so we can be smarter, become smarter and better human beings. And this week, we have the very special opportunity to interview with the Senior Vice President and Chief Economist for California Association of Realtors, Leslie Appleton-Young. She oversees all the work from an economic standpoint of a 200,000 plus member organization, real estate member organization in California. She's also recognized as a woman of influence by Housing Wire, and she's the co-founder of Woman Up, which is an organization to support women in real estate. So instead of man up, it's woman up. So she'll be talking all about that, as well as telling us some of the really interesting findings that she recently conducted a survey of all of their brokers in California, and just lots of great information about the sentiment in the real estate industry, both currently in COVID and post-COVID coming out of this and the recovery ahead. So Leslie, thanks so much for joining us today.
You're welcome, James. It's my pleasure. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, so Leslie, you're all the way out in Florida right now, and you said to me earlier this morning, you literally don't go out much.
No, I don't. I'm in the at-risk group, and to be perfectly honest, I flew here on March 13th from LA. I have not been in an airport since that time, which I think is the first time in over 35 years, and I'm actually enjoying being housebound. It's just a wonderful thing to have your commute be upstairs.
Right, right. Well, that works. And, you know, you and I and Joel Singer, the president of C.A.R., as well as Lennox Scott on the call today, and Chris Kutsky, our John L. Scott owner in Siskiyou North and South, or Siskiyou North or South, which is Mount Shasta and Wairika. We all got together for a nice dinner out in Ashland many years ago. I don't even know, 4 or 5 years ago now.
Well, we were celebrating the opening of Chris as John L. Scott, so we were super excited about that, and we all flew up, and you know that's not easy. You know, you fly to Sacramento and you drive, and it was just really exciting to be there and be with you guys.
We had a great time, and you're right. We were celebrating the grand opening of Chris Kutsky's new John L. Scott office in Wairika. Chris transferred from another brand into John L. Scott, and we were very fortunate to have her join us. She's also she at the time was the immediate past president of California Realtors, and just has been an amazing addition to our ownership group, and it really kind of helps to know Chris, because that's how we got you on the show. So I appreciate her influence in nudging you along, and also Joel, who will be joining us next week. So but I still remember the dinner, and thank you, Lennox, for dinner that evening. It was a great dinner. So thanks for joining us. And I remember you and I had lots of conversation, because you were in the middle of reading some books, and we just got off on that tangent, and I don't want to go on that tangent now, but
no, it had nothing to do with real estate, but everything to do with being a human being.
Patton, you know? Were you?
What?
Patton, wasn't it? Which book were you reading?
No, that wouldn't have been me. That might have been Joel.
Oh, yeah, exactly. All right. Well, so yeah, he was sitting across from me. So
right.
Well, Leslie, let's start out from a macroeconomic standpoint, talking about the general recovery of the economy in our country, both in and outside of the real estate industry. Just kind of your thoughts on that. And for our group, we're going to start macro, and we're going to step on down through Pacific Northwest and into California with just some real interesting stats and measured stats and data. And as we all know, it's kind of, we've all heard if it doesn't get measured, it doesn't get done. And also, if it doesn't get measured, it doesn't get managed. And there's on the internet, 15 people have said that, by the way, but the most famous attribute is Peter Drucker. So, we talk about mindset on this show. We talk about lots of opportunities for growth and kind of getting out of our own way. But then we also want to talk about just the hard stats of where we're at and where we're going. And so, Leslie, could you speak to us a little bit about macroeconomics in our country right now?
Yeah, I just want to say that the data, certainly with respect to GDP, is going to get worse before it gets better, right? It's going to be kind of rear view mirror stuff. And you had a first quarter drop in GDP of 5%. And the expectation is the second quarter that we're not even through yet is going to be the quarter where you get the biggest hit. So the estimates there are between 25 and 35% down. So it's going to be a big negative number. I really see housing as kind of helping to lead out of this. It's like as the shelter in place phases are worked through. I mean, you and I know your agents feel this way. There's a strong sense of people that have been on the sidelines that are more than ready and already getting in. Obviously, buyers more than sellers. So anyway, there's a host of data. I think it's clear that we've bottomed. The official recession was called for February. Some people are actually calling May the beginning of the recovery, right? So you've had businesses start to open up, start to hire some of their workers back. With any forecast that's out there, you just have to recognize that there is this incredible veil of uncertainty, right? And you're seeing it right now. There's been a spike in cases in Washington. There's been a spike in cases in parts of California. There's been a spike out here in Florida. And so the question is, how will it's not just what the government will do, it's also how consumers will respond. So there's a lot of unknowns out there. I think in general, everybody is ready to get back to life, but it's, there's a lot of concern. So I think the other thing I'll just mention with the macro is there was a tremendous amount of relief shot at the economy from Congress with respect to the C.A.R program in particular and the PPP, as well as the Fed announced, low rates till 2022, and they're buying every mortgage-backed and other type of security they can to keep liquidity going. All that being said, this unemployment help ends at the end of July. So is the economy going to be at a point where businesses are going to feel comfortable hiring everybody back and getting everybody on track? So again, that's the uncertainty. We are tracking every major forecasting entity, academic, financial, governmental. Everybody's in tune with the big drop in the second quarter and a recovery in the third and fourth quarter and back to positive growth in 2022 with this huge uncertainty caveat that I've just expressed. So the really short answer to your question is nobody knows, but as we look at the data since the bottom, I believe in April, it's getting better, right? The rate of drop, for example, in initial employment claims is getting lower, and we are seeing a relaxation in shelter in place. So far, so good.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So let's switch to the Pacific Northwest. For our affiliate owners and also company office leaders and all the agents joining us today and brokers, could you speak? Actually, they're brokers in the Pacific Northwest, but they're agents in California. And we want to honor both of those groups, right? So could you talk specifically around the economics of the California real estate market and kind of both, some opportunities ahead, but also some concerns ahead?
Yeah, and here's one of the challenges. All of these areas are unique. Obviously, real estate is local. I do see between the Pacific Northwest and California a lot of similarities. You have the tech hubs, right? You've got Microsoft, you've got Portland, you've got Silicon Valley, and those companies have been bulletproof. I mean, they have been the growth areas of the economy as people have accelerated the trend into the digital world. On the other hand, you've got Boeing, right? You've got the airline industry hit very hard, and Boeing having extra challenges. In the Los Angeles area, you've got the entertainment business that has been pretty much shut down because of production. So there's a lot of give and take, a lot of similarities out there.
Major industries impacted that support the entire area, right?
Absolutely. And the state governments are challenged, right? I was reading about Seattle looking at an $8.8 billion drop in tax revenues over the next 2 years. In California, we've got a $54 billion deficit and a $17 billion rainy day fund, right? So there's a mismatch. There are going to be, already you're seeing furloughs and pay cuts and hiring freezes. How long does this go on will determine if that is more deeply entrenched or if we bounce back and see some growth. I will say, as we segue and talk about the housing market, the other huge similarity is the lack of inventory. And I think it's important for people to remember that all of the fundamentals that were in place in February are still there today, right? This isn't 2009 where it was the housing sector and the financial markets that seized up. This has been a pause button that took an economy that came really roaring into 2020. Remember, in February, we had historic all-time low unemployment rate of 3.5%. So it's important to gauge the economy here with respect to the housing market, but we are still seeing an excess demand situation. One of the things I was thinking the other day, I heard someone say this, think of June and May and June as January. And you start a year in January and the buyers are all lined up ready to go and the sellers are still kind of thinking about it. They want to sell, but what's the timing? What do they need to do to their home? So on and so forth. So as I look at the demand side of housing, I think we're out of the COVID veil, if you will, right? Buyers are ready to go, looking as historic low rates. We had a 3.15% mortgage rates. They're ready to go. Sellers a little bit more hesitant on top of a market. And again, the Northwest and California, very low inventory. And it's even lower today than it was a year ago.
Mm-hmm. Well, so that's that's what we've experienced in this area, and we've seen a fairly significant increase in activity in the real estate market. Obviously, since March, we all experienced a significant reduction in March just because of the stay-at-home order.
Well, John L. Scott has always done such an excellent job with the data. And as I looked at all the different geographic areas, except for Idaho, that is, again, every part of the country is experiencing this differently, right? In terms of infections and how people are responding and so on and so forth. But when you look at kind of your core market areas, new listings are down from last year. Active listings are down from last year pretty significantly, 30, 40, sometimes 50%. And pendings are down maybe 5 to 10 or 14% from last year. So that shows you the shift in the balance, if you will, compared to a year ago.
Right. So, let's move to California from a recovery standpoint in the next 12 to 24 months. Is there anything unique to California that you see in this area? We have, as you know, we're expanding into California as a company, and we have many of our guests on the show today, as well as our viewers on Facebook. Live and work in California as expert real estate agents and owners. And so I know that we have several firm owners on the show today, and they would love to hear direct from you about California and obviously specifically for their area, but we can't do that. But just kind of your thoughts around recovery as well as just areas of opportunity in the next 12 to 24.
Yeah, well, again, the length and the strength of the recovery is tied to the government orders coupled with people's willingness to get back to their lives, if you will. And as I look at the data for the Northwest and California, I don't see a lot of difference there. It really depends on how directly impacted they have been. And I've talked to Chris about this, right? Chris is up in Wairika in an area where there just hasn't been much of a change at all. You know, I talked to other people in Seattle or down here in Los Angeles, and it's a different ball game. So I would say the recovery will be a little bit uneven. But again, given how low inventory is, right? Some of your areas had a 0.4 month supply of homes on the market, right? Or less than a 1 month supply. So even in a world where people are a little bit constrained from buying, you're still in multiple offer situations, and you're still in a world where prices are staying fairly firm. The backdrop here, again, another common feature is the rate environment, which we just mentioned. And I think buyers in particular, are responding to that because there's been a little window opening, if you will, in terms of affordability. I think another opportunity to look at is to really track the migration numbers. We've been looking at the American Community Survey from the Census Bureau religiously for over 10 years, just to figure out kind of what's happening and where people are going. And, you know, of the 5 states where Californians go, both Washington and Oregon are in the top 5, right? Because people are looking for sometimes affordability and sometimes for quality of life. But when we look at the data, we find the key driver is affordability. And so we see people leaving the Bay Area for Sacramento and then leaving Sacramento for other states. We see people leaving coastal Southern California for the Inland Empire, and then the Inland Empire out of state. So I think there is a tremendous opportunity to tap into people's desire to move that has been accelerated by work from anywhere, right? Work from home. I can work from anywhere. I can work in a rural environment. I can work out of state. And I think that's a game changer, not for the whole economy, but for the people that are working from home for the first time. I've looked at a lot of surveys on this. Typically about 50% are in it for the long haul. They wouldn't want to go back. And when you survey them, they're interested in moving, right? So I think that's something that is a trend that's worth paying attention to going forward.
Well, Leslie, you and I talked earlier this week about some of the survey that you had done, and I want to get into that. But also, just you had talked a little bit about how there's opportunities in the country in Middle America for growth and opportunity for areas that typically didn't see business, at least startup business, happen. Venture capitalists moving out, obviously for affordable housing, creating opportunities out in Middle America. And I think that's really interesting, and it has to do with us as well. So this isn't just a Middle America discussion, but it's also around the design, literally the design of homes. I know for my wife and I, it's like we need 2 offices now. I mean, like,
Right,
I,
right,
I don't know if I'm okay with the dining room being an office, right, forever.
right.
But there's it's interesting when you talk about accelerated changes, and then we have this, and then we have proof of this where opportunities now, because we've almost kicked into this virtual's okay to work from home kind of thing. Tell us a little bit about your findings there, and also just around the house and how it may look different in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you used to go to work, come home, have a little family time, have dinner, go to sleep, repeat the next day. Well, now your home is totally multi-purpose, right? It is your office and maybe your partner or spouse's office. It is your gym, right? Peloton stock has gone through the roof. I'm one of those people that had to leave Soul Cycle and became a Peloton person, and I'm not, I'm not going back. It's also a school for some people, and in many cases, it's intergenerational. I mean that the feeling that, gee, we could all do this together, and maybe it's pulling resources, maybe it's not wanting to put mom and dad in some kind of a assisted living facility, whatever. But I think the demand for different types of housing is going to be absolutely huge. And as you mentioned, you need 2 offices. Well, most houses today don't, if they have one office or an alcove, that's all they've got. So, and some people may have a home that they can accommodate that
Right.
now, but most people don't.
Right, right. Well, it is interesting how this thought has been really just accelerated um, by COVID, literally, and and yet it's a huge opportunity for our area, our outlying offices. So the offices that aren't in kind of the core. And one of the things that you were talking about with me earlier this week was your feeling around even just like it should be standard to have a floor plan on the listings. And I know that that's really kind of an extra that many agents and brokers don't add in. And anymore these days, especially with this changing trend, is that floor plan should be in there. I know Matterport, it's an extra whatever $15 for a floor plan. If you use Matterport, there's just a huge amount of opportunity there
Right.
to educate, especially. I mean, obviously, with floor plans would be essential with dimensions during this time where it's not where it hasn't been easy to go and look at homes. But what's your thoughts on that, and just a little bit more on that?
Absolutely. I mean, look, everything has gone virtual, and not everything is going to stay virtual, but our whole industry is going to be more virtual. And I loved what you guys have at the bottom of your market reports, where you essentially say to your clients, video is here to stay, and we're going to be doing more video, and it's just more efficient for everybody. I was reading that in Australia, almost 100% of the listings have a floor plan, and in the United States it's like 5%. And I'm thinking, this is absolutely crazy, right? You want to see if your furniture is going to fit, you want to get a sense for the house that you all often don't get kind of walking through the home. So I think that's something that's going to be that's going to stay with us. One of the questions, we're doing these weekly surveys of members asking about kind of, how's the market? What's it look like? What are you doing? And one of the questions was, have you had a buyer go into escrow without seeing the home? And that's about 10%, 10% of the total. And then we said, do you have any vacant listings? About half of the people do. And a lot of them did it on purpose, right? To make it easier for people to go in and see the home. And I think there'll be some of that will just be incorporated as possible uh, uh, going forward. So you really just want to reduce the friction in the transaction and make it easy for them to see if this is going to work. And honestly, I think 10 out of 100 may go into escrow without seeing the home. Most people won't, right? They're going to want to smell it and taste it and get all that, but they'll be able to just go see a few of them because they will have had such a good feel for it beforehand, digitally, you know?
Right, right. You know, it is interesting on the virtual staging. It always was, there was this sense of it was almost like bait and switch because you get to the house like, oh my gosh, there's no furniture in here. And I don't know the answer to this. They might show a kind of before and after staging so that you're not really bait and switching. You're allowing the consumer to toggle between staged and unstaged. That seems like full disclosure, like just an idea of how furniture would lay out. You have a 3-person couch here. This isn't like elongated by the camera kind of thing.
Right, right.
So it's like truth in lending, truth in real estate, right?
Oh, listen,
Um,
full disclosure is always the way to go, right? You never,
absolutely,
no
absolutely.
regrets when you do that.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So I want to get into this 2020 coronavirus survey that you did with your brokers.
Right,
It's a huge multi-slide deck that you presented at Inman, correct?
correct.
And I'd love for you to just touch on some of the high points there and some value for our office leaders, our real estate office owners, as well as and brokers here.
Yeah, well, I will say just off the top that the large companies have an advantage because they are able to provide the platforms, the support, and the training for the digital virtual transaction experience. And you know, coming out of this, it's the tech-enabled agent that is going to be the winner. Absolutely. And you know, before you could be tech enabled and be a star or not, right? If whatever you were doing was working, and even though all these tools were out there, it's like, hey, I'm good. I'm well, during this period, I mean, just the stories have been so wonderful about the rapid adaptation to using Zoom and using an e-notary and just all of the various components. So I think you're going to see that, and in our survey, so we kind of asked how many of you were using Zoom before, and it was a fairly small percentage. How many, and again, I'm going to talk about the firms with 50 or more agents because that's going to be more appropriate to the John L. Scott audience. And we said, how many of you using it now? And it was like 3/4, you know, are using Zoom. And over half of them were planning to continue after this was all over. In fact, they reported that people attending their weekly and monthly meetings was actually higher on Zoom than it was when they had to go into an office, right? Then we kind of asked some strategic questions of the broker about how they saw any changes in how they're doing business. You know, are they going to consolidate offices? Are they looking at reducing their footprint? And it was something like 35%, much more than the smaller offices were planning to do that. Almost all of them were planning to be in business, you know, 3 years from now. This wasn't going to be a game changer. And many of them were planning to see more agents, not fewer agents, going forward. So really having that base of operations where you can provide the tools that allows the agent to be the expert, to be technically excellent, and kind of present it. Look, everybody, it's 2020. You know, it's time. You know, it's time to be able to incorporate all the data
There's another
um,
quote, Aaron. Look,
in a
everybody,
smooth
it's
format,
2020. It's
right?
time.
and make it happen. So that was just really a wonderful kind of reassurance at looking at. Obviously, they're doing what they can to cut costs. Absolutely. I mean, that's what, you know. It's more efficient, and here you're going to have a however long period where revenues are going to be challenged. But there was a lot of optimism going forward. And the other thing we asked them is, how comfortable do you think your agents are with the virtual transaction? How comfortable the agents were, right? So I think the messaging that you guys do every time I see something from John L. Scott, right, is really more important than ever.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, that's great. You know, it's interesting, even on the Zoom thing, in the past, if you had mentioned, 5 months ago, even just 5 months ago, if you said, hey, let's grab a Zoom call, it's like, yeah, no, I'll pass, right? Like
Right.
now it's like, well, I mean, we can, you could just turn off your, you know, video if you want, but that's just kind of, I'm at my desk, right? Like it's easier to be, I've been on a Zoom call all day, right? Why not go on one more? Right. And so it's an interesting shift for all, but also this from an office leadership standpoint, this thought that people have to be present in the office for that meeting, and that if that in almost in many cases, Zoom was not even an option. And I know we have a few offices that were publishing to a private Facebook group for their meetings, and that was always a great opportunity. But obviously, culture is valuable to bring the group together. But you're hearing out there that the Zoom meeting opportunity will remain.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm sure you see that in your own company. Certainly at C.A.R. I have a short, funny story about Joel since he's going to be on next week. But it took us a year to get our work from home policy going, and it was like, yes, but what's your performance review like? And can we make sure you're not going to be eating bonbons at home?
Right.
And you can't do it on Friday and a Monday. And it was all tied up, right? And literally within a week, it became, here's your laptop, get home, we want you to be safe, right? So
Right.
everybody was literally, the whole company, thrown into virtual. And I know Joe will tell you, has never seen the staff work as hard, as diligently, been as connected, we're over communicating. And I think that's what Zoom does, right?
You know,
If you can't see people in person, you over communicate, and it works. It
you know,
absolutely works.
I think that's really interesting, where you might think that the virtual meetings and Zoom and whatnot and all that we've had to do almost by requirement in the last couple months would disconnect us. But I agree. I know from our corporate office, I feel way more connected to all the players that I have to work with on a daily basis. Our connection is tenfold now. We're not operating without engaging. So yeah, that's a huge opportunity, and that should obviously transcend into our groups and teams within the office environment. I know that companies are looking at, like, well, hey, when we do finally lift from this stay-at-home thing, don't all go to vacation at once, right? So there's conversation around that. I've heard that certainly around town, right? So there is like, hey, we got to mitigate this vacation thing because none of you guys have been able to take it, right? So but hey, I want to talk to you a little bit about consolidation trends for our owners. I went through some of your stats on the survey, and the sentiment was that the larger brokerages, the multi-office brokerages, were probably going to be looking at consolidation. What's your thoughts on that? And also opportunities for growth, right? Because with consolidation comes opportunities for growth, oftentimes for our offices out there.
Absolutely. I think too many brokers have offices with desks that never get used, that have square footage that is going to waste. And typically in a downturn, it's the leases that are a huge problem. So you've got to take advantage of this opportunity where mindsets are open to do something different, right? To figure out a different way of connecting and being together, and also just providing options, right? It doesn't, it's not like the office is going away. There's just going to be an office that's maybe a little bit further, so you're not going in as often, but it's still there if you need it. And certainly for a broker who's managing, or the transaction coordinator, they can be talking digitally kind of all the time. But I think the overriding thing for the offices and the broker is to just maximize the ability to get efficient and not waste money, right? Not waste space. And if you can kind of reduce footprints, if you can bring kind of like-minded offices together, it really becomes a win-win for everybody. Clients aren't going to be impressed with an office they never go into. Right? They're going to they're going to be doing a lot of the transaction discussions over the internet and meeting at the house eventually, but they may not ever go into the office. So why prioritize that? I think you really want to bulletproof the broker's budget to the extent that you can, and that's really a very important way to do that, especially now.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. So, Erin, I know you have a question out there. Could you bring that up now?
Yeah, for sure. I was kind of wondering, for brokers who are wondering, just kind of what are the best ways to share economic news with their clients in a way that they won't tune out and can actually really understand what's going on in the economy, what's going on in the market. With so many headlines out there, we want to be showing, what's really happening, but also not making our clients tune out as soon as we start talking numbers. So I don't know if you have any sources or any like ways that you approach it that you recommend when you're talking to just the average Joe about the economy.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of different things. One, if you're sharing on social media or Facebook, you just want a one-page infographic that's communicating one clear point. For example, in today's market, I know there are people out there that don't think any real estate is being transacted, and that's not the case, right? And you look at kind of the monthly reports that come out from John L. Scott, and it's just a wealth of information, and it's presented, with great colors and great graphics. And to me, I would be diving into that and really reusing that kind of content, and maybe they already have that available. There's a company called Keeping Current Matters that does a really good job with just kind of daily updates and daily infographics. You can follow them on Instagram if you want to see. And I think it depends on what your purpose is. If your purpose is to establish yourself as the market expert, you want to focus on the neighborhoods that you're, for an agent, right? You want to focus on the neighborhoods that you are, that's kind of your bag, right? And the houses that are there and the trends that are there, and really just communicate like 1 point per infographic. You might try doing, like a 10-minute podcast every week and talking about what's going on in the market. I mean, I feel that consumers are looking to the realtor to talk about real estate, not so much the overall economic trends. I mean, that may come up, and what are your thoughts about what's happening in the stock market and this and that? But what they're really looking for is the context of the decision that they're making. So I think keep it short and sweet and keep it consistent. Whatever you decide to do, if it's every Monday, every day, once a month, but just pick it and stay with it. So it's a message that they can count on, and just don't get too technical. I mean, I kind of see this all the time, and when I'm speaking, I can see when the eyes glaze over. I know when it's just too much. I felt it today. It's like, no, you don't need to go into that much detail, but get them interested enough to want to have a conversation.
Right. Well, thank you, Erin, for that question.
James, I have a question.
Yes.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, hi.
Uh-oh.
Good to see you, Leslie. Thank you.
Good to see you, Lennox.
Yeah, thanks for being with us. So there's an expression in the Godfather movie, hit the mattresses. Well, in economics, it's hit the numbers, and those numbers create a PR opportunities, the analysis of them.
Absolutely.
And how important is that in your speaking and getting out in the press on a local basis, things like that?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm waking up luckily 3 hours earlier now than California. And the first thing I do is read the Wall Street Journal, read the New York Times, and check Bloomberg and make sure, because things are changing on a daily basis, right? And it's really important to get a feel. And once you start doing this, I know you've been doing it for years, as have I, but you really start to get a feel for a flavor, and you know where different periodicals are coming from, and so on. But it's absolutely critical, especially today when things are changing so dramatically. And what the federal government does, either on Capitol Hill or the Fed, has a direct impact on the market and on people's pocketbooks and on people's plans. So extremely important to stay knowledgeable. I mean, real estate is the number one safest place. You know, this is the Gallup poll every year, right? Where should I put my money? It's about real estate. So we have to kind of protect our position there.
Yep. One more quick question. The view from the Northwest is the whole nation moves to California, and then we get the bounce effect up here to the Northwest. You've been underneath travel restrictions in California for non-essential travel. Have those been eased up at all, or when do you anticipate? Because that will spring buyers forward to the Northwest, and especially to some of our resort markets.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's really the transportation that's keeping people back. I mean, you can now fly. I mean, there aren't as many flights, and I'm hearing some people are wearing, you know, it's every other seat in mass, and others it was a completely full flight. So I think the underlying question is, when are people going to be comfortable kind of making that decision? And I think in a couple of months, as we're more through this, because I really believe that this is going to cause a lot of leapfrogging to parts of the country that people may not have considered before. And the thing about the Northeast is you've got these tech hubs, you've got these wonderful cities, and then, oh my goodness, you have these rural areas that are just gorgeous, right? So I would definitely be braced for more in migration, but not just from California, from really all over, you know. I mean, this is going to be a very interesting kind of leveling of the playing field in terms of geography, I believe, over the next 3 to 5 years.
How many people are in California right now, approximately?
This year we will reach 40 million residents.
Okay, and so up in the Northwest, we have maybe 10, 11 million. So that's such an impact from California up here to the Northwest.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, inextricably tied. And so many Californians look to the Northwest as, gee, I'd love to be there someday. And they always have, you know. It's just been a question of jobs, right? And now that's not the issue anymore.
Thank you, James.
Oh, thank you, Lennox. You know, it is interesting, Leslie, when you were talking about migration to the Pacific Northwest, and it's almost a two-step process, right? From, you know, like the Bay Area to Sacramento to then Oregon or Seattle. Is that really the case? I mean, is that what we see?
Yeah, well, we're seeing a leapfrog, right? So for California, the inland part has always been where the affordable housing was available, right? And so you've got a leapfrog when prices go up on the coast inland, but then there are people that are living there that are priced out of the market as prices increase, and so then they go. So in terms of going to the Northwest, obviously affordability isn't going to drive people that are going to an equally expensive area, if you will, you know, from the Bay Area up into Seattle. That's going to be driven by other quality of life and those kinds of concerns. But when you look at the areas we were talking about a few days ago that are at more rural but more connected now that we're in this digital world, I think that's where you're going to see the opportunities.
Well, I want to get to this woman up organization that you're a co-founder of.
Right.
So like I said at the beginning here, for those who joined a little bit later, instead of man up, this is woman up. And as Leslie mentioned before we started the call today, men lean away, women lean in. Let's time to woman up. And I want to hear all about this. This is an organization to support women in real estate. So Leslie, tell us about Woman Up.
Oh, thank you for answering this question. So this started about 4 or 5 years ago when Sarah Sudachen and I, so Sarah works for me, and we were putting together broker meetings around the state for our leadership team and Joel. And it was like, where are the women, right? And we actually found a few, but it was few and far between. And it was just so jarring being in an industry where almost 60% of the agents are female, to be looking at the brokerage community. And we were looking at, brokers with 50 or more agents, and having it be so slim. So that really, we kind of said, oh, why don't we put on a conference, So we put on this conference, and we thought 100 people would show up, and we had 350 people show up. And what happened was we had like a speaker and then a panel. Chris participated. I mean, it was wonderful, but we had women with incredible stories and advice, and who had never been asked to be on a stage before.
Wow.
And if you go back, if you look at Inman back then, and if you look at T3, I mean, there's no women up on the stage, and it's hard to get inspired to maybe take the next step and grow in your field when you don't see people that look or talk like you. So anyway, we were very encouraged by the response. We are going to have our fourth conference September 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. It's going to be a virtual conference. We love men. Joel and our officer team, when this started, with
So
Steve
this isn't
Weiss.
about hating men, right?
Oh my God, never. Jeff McIntosh, no. But it's about awareness, and men and women communicate differently. So it's, one of the things I love talking about is active listening, and pointing out how often, when someone says, I need to tell you about something that's upsetting me. My mother just got diagnosed with cancer. And if you immediately say, oh, my mother died of cancer, no, you don't want to do that. You want to just listen to hear, not to respond. So it's things like that you don't get. I mean, we talk about hardcore, finances and brokerage and so on, but we also talk about interconnecting on a human level, and leaning out to give others the mic, right? I mean, we talk about not mentorship, but sponsorship. And a sponsor is someone who sticks up for you in the, when you're not in the room, and someone that gives you the mic. And that's what we are, that's what we're about, right? And we are really looking at what's going on with racial injustice in the country as just another opportunity to highlight just these amazing Black brokers in California who are speaking up. So it's everybody wins with diversity. It's not a zero-sum game. It is a, if you haven't read Humans Are Underrated, it's one of my all-time favorite books, and it just talks about how important it is to have different people in the room, and how much better everything is when you do that. So anyway, thanks for asking. I'm very passionate about it.
Well, it makes all the sense in the world when you look at the demographics of our real estate population. And I mean, it really is a melting pot when you look at the whole, country and who's an agent with us. Obviously, it's its own country.
Well, and I just want to say, I have been so grateful for my career at C.A.R. I'm actually retiring at the end of this year, and I just look at all of the amazing people that have supported me and never thought it was weird that C.A.R. had a female economist, So I've been in my own little bubble my whole career too. So I really feel very grateful for that, but I want to give back to others that may not be having quite as easy a time.
Oh, and we just appreciate just all your knowledge. Not, that obviously you're not just California centric, but the entire country, and you bring, that knowledge, and then obviously make it relevant to who you speak with. And I know you're a very, very popular speaker out there because of that. And so, just appreciate all your knowledge in this area. I've got a couple more questions. I'm going to go a few minutes over, just since we started a few minutes late. Is that okay with you, Leslie?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So a couple questions is, well, number one is that you were quoted as once saying the pandemic is actually a gift to our agents in a strange way. And I know that you weren't looking at the pandemic as an opportunity. It's not an opportunistic statement, but rather just kind of like the subtle nuance that comes out of the pandemic for our agents and brokers and owners and office leaders. Could you speak on that?
Yeah, if I could count how many times I've heard that real estate is a relationship business, you know, so many times. But when you survey consumers, they're typically not happy with losing contact with their agent after the close of escrow, right? And the way they rate the transaction is very closely tied to how the communication went in the transaction. And again, people like to communicate differently. So I always suggest just say, how often would you like to hear from me and in what format? And I remember years ago, I would say, there would be fewer divorces if when people got married, they would just say, how often would you like to hear from me and in what format? It's just like, let's get it all out and let's
I'm taking note right now.
Right. And let's be on the same page. So what I was referring to with the pandemic is what a perfect opportunity to connect with your past clients without any discussion of real estate, but just how are you doing? How's your family? Can I help you in any way? And it being authentic and true and just human being to human being and reconnecting at a period when, let's face it, we're all doing Zoom calls with our family. They're starting to feel a little bit like work, right? But we're doing that. So that's what I was trying to say, is that it was just a terrific opportunity to connect because we're all in the same boat. Absolutely.
You're right. I mean, the pandemic did tee up the opportunity for just a genuine phone call and a reach out to our client base, past, present, current, to just check on them. I know received a contact from the mom of a friend from high school. I hadn't talked to her in years, and she just said, "Hey, I thought about you guys, and I was reaching out, and I thought how special, and I had that, but there's clients that we haven't talked to for years for one reason or another, and this is not about the next sale. This is about checking in on the people that you care for and that you've been involved in and you've shared in their life. So there's the opportunity for us all. So the tech-enabled agent wins, like you said, but then also the relationship agent wins, and they go together. And this is that opportunity to do that without the client, wondering if there's an agenda behind it.
Right. Absolutely.
Well, so you talked about Humans Are Underrated as one of your favorite books, but do you have any other favorite business books you would like to share with the group today? Because we're all consumers of information and would love to hear what you would recommend.
Well, I think there's a book called Crucial Conversations that I would recommend. And the point is, the conversations you avoid are the most important to have. And how do you diffuse the defensiveness of such a situation and have a productive conversation that helps both of you? So that would be one. And then I'm looking over here right now, I'm reading Always Day One, which is a look at Microsoft and Amazon and Facebook, and just inside a culture where you are reinventing things every day, and just what that mindset looks like. And then the other one by Celeste Headley, who I who I heard speak at Leading RE one year, and I know I've seen you guys there before. It's called We Need to Talk, and she is the one that, and she has a 20-minute TED Talk as well, but she's the one that really lays out how to be a good listener, right? How to listen, not to respond, but just to take in, and what a difference that makes in communication, because it really tells the person on the other side that you see them, you hear them, you honor them, you love them. I mean, it's an amazing gift. And I will tell you, once you get into practicing it, it is absolutely liberating, because you give up your ego, you give up, oh, what am I going to say? And it's not that saying my mother got cancer too isn't a true attempt to connect with somebody. It's just that person doesn't need to hear that right now. They don't need the focus off them. They need you to focus on them by listening. So that book really changed my life. So those are a couple to recommend.
Yeah, and I'm going to give Emmanuel credit here. I don't know if it was an original to Emmanuel, but one of our executives here at John L. Scott says be interested instead of interesting. And
Yes.
so much of the
Love
time, you
that.
know, our agents are out there trying to be interesting to their clients. And yet, you know, I mean, the best example is, you know, you go to lunch with someone and you just listen to them for an entire hour. And after that entire hour, they say to you, oh my gosh, this has been the best lunch ever. Thank you so much. And you're thinking to yourself, I didn't say much at all. All I did is listen. But, you know, sometimes that's, or most of the time, that's all we need as humans, is just someone to talk to and someone to listen to us and be interested. So just such a great reminder. And thanks for those books.
Listen, everyone on the planet, every single person on the planet knows something you don't know. Everybody.
Yeah.
So if you have that mindset, even though and if you're speaking, you're not learning anything, right? So get in a mode of taking it in and learning, and it's an incredible gift that you can give yourself.
Emmanuel told me it's Carnegie. That's where he got that. But
Perfect.
but you could have taken it, Emmanuel. You could have taken it. So I wanted to thank you so much for joining us. One more question though: who's your hero?
I honestly, I wasn't prepared for that question, and I really don't know what to say, honestly.
Okay.
Who is your hero?
That was the question. So I want to thank Leslie Appleton-Young.
I have so many heroes.
You know what? You can interrupt me as I do this outro.
Okay.
And you can email us and we'll tell everyone, don't worry. And I like stumping you at least once on a call, so don't worry about it. I want to thank Leslie Appleton-Young for joining us on Facebook Fridays with John L. Scott Real Estate Company. This has just been an amazing opportunity for us to hear that kind of measured data and how that applies to us in our business, and obviously the economy in both the country as well as, you know, locally. I'm hearing just the trends and all the amazing kind of future opportunities coming up for us, and things that are going to stick, mostly technology that's going to stick, that we're going to be using to connect with others, and that's going to be okay. So I just want to thank John L. Scott, all of you on the call, for putting up with our technical issues, I guess, this morning for our Facebook Friday, for our Facebook Live group, for joining us and watching the recording, and our moderators, Nick and Aaron, on both Zoom as well as Facebook, and all of you for joining us. And remember that we are here to live life as a contribution. That's our core value here in John L. Scott, registered trademark. And Leslie, thanks so much for joining us this morning, and well, this afternoon for you, since you're in Florida. And we wish you a wonderful weekend.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And I will say, one of my heroes will be with you next week. And after you hear from him, you'll know why. He's a total mensch. So absolutely, Joel.
Okay, so yeah, Joel Singer, the president of California Association of Realtors, and he'll be joining us, and he's just gonna put an
He's
exclamation.
amazing.
Yeah, you guys, we will see you next week, and hopefully live as well next week. Thank you, Leslie, for joining us, and stay safe out there.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.